In this review we're looking at the Terrafirma Return to Centre Damper. A steering dampener is a shock absorber that is mounted to the steering and should help take out and control shock loads. A steering dampener is set up different from a suspension shock absorber. In a suspension shock, the damping is controlled differently on the rebound and compression. A steering dampener is valved 50-50 so that the same amount of effort is needed to compress and extend it. The Terrafirma RTC damper has an added spring which will extend and compress along with the damper when you steer from lock to lock. There are three main parts to the complete unit: the damper itself, the spring and the spring retaining collar. Here is what the complete unit looks like. Setup is straightforward. Add the spring to the damper, but leave the retaining collar loose, so it can slide up and down the damper body. Then install onto the car with the steering set in the straight ahead position. Now tighten up the retaining collar. On my setup, as you can see here, I run with the ball joint on the drag link as opposed to the drop arm. The reason for this is it's much easier and quicker to replace the drag link end than the stock Defender ball joint on the drop arm. I also have oversized carbon steel steering links, so I had to fabricate my own tube clamp in order to attach the damper to the link. Personally, I'm not sure on calling it a return to centre damper, as it will not magically return the steering to the centre on its own. You will still need to make sure you have the correct steering geometry and caster angle, but the damper does definitely help keeping the steering centred. Where the RTC damper really becomes an advantage is over rough, uneven ground with large tyres. Here it will aid control and straight line stability. Just before Croatia Trophy last year, I was in two minds whether to fit the steering dampener or not, as prior to this I'd been running without, after a cheap stock one had failed. But what made me fit it was the type of event: 8 long days of only off-road driving. The tight, muddy forest tracks require a lot of steering input, as can be seen from our in-cab footage. So I was hoping by adding the RTC damper it would help lighten the steering and reduce fatigue. It definitely did help, and the steering felt really much more responsive. Also, in the last 12 months I've not had to change out the steering box. Normally, even with a stock damper fitted, I'd expect to have had to replace the box at least once in the last season. Hitting rocks and trees with the speed and force that we do in a competition puts a huge strain on the box, and usually it starts to go notchy or even fail altogether. In all, the Terrafirma Return to Centre Damper has really surprised me, and I'll definitely be keeping it fitted to the truck.